Good evening, friends. Go ahead and dim your lights now. Nestle into your favorite blanket, let the day slip from your shoulders and settle into stillness. Can you hear that faint rustle outside your window? Maybe it's just the breeze, or maybe the soft memory of a medieval queen whispering across time. If this quiet journey helps your mind ease, and you find a little comfort here, feel free to tap, like, or subscribe, but only if it feels right. No pressure, we're simply here to rest together. Now, let's wander back through time, far back, before electricity, before toothpaste, before even the idea of a snack cabinet. Back to a world where queens ruled not only courts, but hearts. And sometimes, headlines of scandal only scribes dared to whisper. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what secrets a royal velvet chamber might hide? What really went on behind the heavy oak doors of the castle? Not the stuff in fairy tales, but the quiet betrayals, the hidden lovers, the power plays written between the sheets of parchment and silk. Let's explore that together without drama, just curiosity. Picture this, a damp English morning. Somewhere in the year 1327, there's a light fog spilling over the moors, like warm milk. And inside a grey stone tower, a woman slips a ring from her finger. Her name is Isabella of France. And the man who gave her that ring, she's sending him to his death. Now, don't worry, this isn't a tale of action or horror. Quite the opposite. It's slow, quiet, like watching mist rise from tea. We're simply peeking into the still corners of history that most people forget to dust. Isabella, known to some as the She-Wolf of France, married Edward II of England in 1308. It was all silk veils and church bells, but beneath the golden ceremony, a storm. You see, Edward had a favorite, not a knight, not a counselor, but a man named Piers Gaveston, charming, extravagant, and absolutely loathed by the court. They shared gifts, lands, whispers. Isabella was not amused, and yet she played the role. For years, all smiles, until one day she didn't. They say the breaking point came when Edward abandoned her and their children during an invasion, leaving her stranded in hostile France. Not ideal queen behavior, wouldn't you agree? So what does she do? She strikes a deal with her lover. His name was Roger Mortimer, a baron, a rebel, and, well, someone she probably wasn't supposed to be smuggling into her royal chambers. But isn't that how many stories turn? With a stolen moment and a risk no one expected. But this isn't about drama, just rest. Picture the flicker of a candle behind stone lattice, the crunch of boots on frosted grass as Mortimer sneaks through the inner courtyard, and the soft sigh of a queen who's decided she's done pretending. It's oddly cozy, isn't it? The idea that even queens had moments where the crown grew too heavy, and all they wanted was a warm fire and someone who truly listened. The fun part, their rebellion worked. Edward was deposed, imprisoned, eventually quietly murdered. A poker, according to rumors. I won't describe that. Too spicy for sleep. Let's keep it light. Let's talk snacks. Did you know, during medieval feasts, queens like Isabella indulged in something called nard cakes? It was a spiced pastry, made from wheat, honey, and lavender oil. Think of it as a medieval Pop-Tart, but floral and chewy. Nobles loved them, especially with wine. Which makes me think, if you had a lavender tart and a goblet of red right now, wouldn't you feel like royalty? And yet, none of it kept her happy. Because after a brief taste of power, Isabella fell. From grace, her son, Edward III turned on her. Mortimer was executed. She was locked away, but not unkindly, more like given time out with a really nice allowance. It's funny. You can orchestrate a coup and still end up in comfy retirement. That's Queen energy. Let that thought settle as the candle flickers low in the tower. Outside, the sheep are quiet. The wind hums like a lullaby across the moors. No danger here, just echoes. We'll stay here a bit longer before moving on. There are more velvet secrets to come. The year is 1199. The world smells of hearth smoke and wet earth. In the Kingdom of England, tucked inside thick stone walls near Winchester, another royal scandal gently brews beneath layers of wool, lace, and deeply laced corsets. She's known as Eleanor of Aquitaine. You may have heard of her, a duchess, a queen twice over, and, dare I say, the closest thing medieval Europe had to a celebrity power player. Married first to the King of France, then to the King of England. She had 12 children, 2 thrones, and one rather spicy reputation. But here's a twist most forget. She was imprisoned by her own husband. Now pause for a moment. What kind of dinner conversation ends with your spouse locking you in a castle for 16 years? There's a quiet irony there, isn't there? You give someone 10 children and they thank you with solitary confinement. Royal marriages were ... complicated. They say it happened after Eleanor supported their sons in a rebellion against the king. Henry II was not amused. So into the tower she went, like a chess piece quietly removed from the board. But here's the cozy detail no one talks about. Eleanor wasn't tossed into a dungeon filled with rats. No, no. She lived in fine chambers, surrounded by tapestries, loyal attendants, and possibly a fluffy little greyhound named Rosamond, though that part may be apocryphal. Still, wouldn't it be nice to picture her curled on a velvet couch, reading Latin poetry with her pup? And while the rest of England marched and battled, Eleanor rested. She wrote letters, gave gifts, planned from afar, and when Henry died, later Eleanor was released. She was old by then, in her late 60s, but sharper than most kings. She stepped right back into power, arranging marriages, managing lands, and charming popes with the ease of someone born to rule, and born to outlive anyone who got in her way. Can you feel the soft glow of the fire beside her chair? Hear the low scratch of her quill against parchment as she writes a letter to her son, King Richard the Lionheart. Be patient, she writes. Trust no one. It's like a medieval mother's bedtime advice, still useful today. Now, let's open a window in that tower chamber for a breath of cool night air. You might smell beeswax and rosemary. You might hear the crack of hooves far below on the cobblestones, or the distant trill of a nightingale. And maybe, just maybe, Eleanor's whisper carried far through the wind that night, all the way across Europe to a little French town where another queen was stirring from sleep. Her name, Marguerite of Provence. She'd become the Queen of France just a few decades later, and while her reign was less dramatic, her sweets were far more interesting. She loved almond pastries soaked in rose water. Think of it like a marzipan bath bomb you could eat. It was her comfort food, and hers alone, because sugar was so expensive it was stored under lock and key, sometimes treated like treasure. Let me ask you something. If you had one drawer in your house you could lock, and inside it was just your favorite dessert, what would it be? For Marguerite, it was sugared violets and preserved oranges from the south of France. For Eleanor, likely nothing sweet at all. She liked her wine mulled, her power firm and her enemies nervous. But both women, queens, both women misunderstood, and both left behind a trail of quiet rebellion stitched into the silk of court history. Let your thoughts drift there, to those long halls, the hush of slippers on polished stone, the rustle of a fur-trimmed cloak brushing past a chapel door at midnight. There's something soothing in the rhythm of it. No rush, just memory, slow and honeyed. Soon we'll step into another chamber, a colder one. But for now, rest in world where queens aged like wine, and revenge was best served with tea. Now follow the candlelight further, deeper into the folds of time. There's frost on the window panes now, and the fire has dimmed to glowing coals. You're in a quieter place, perhaps even closer to a secret than before, because this next queen, she didn't whisper her rebellion. She wore it like a perfume, where, in the mid-1400s, England again. And the woman in question is Margaret of Anjou, a French-born queen. Married to Henry VI of England, she was thrust into a world teetering on war and insanity. Henry, bless his royal heart, was more dreamer than ruler, gentle, pious, and occasionally not entirely present. There were long stretches where he simply didn't speak, or respond, or lead, which left Margaret holding the crown and the chaos. Some called her bold, others called her cruel, but maybe she was just a woman doing a job no one else could. Can you hear the scrape of armor being fitted outside her tent? Smell the iron and boiled leather and something faintly floral maybe. Lavender sewn into her sleeves to steady her nerves. She led armies. She rode into battle. Pregnant, pause for a moment. Can you picture a queen, cloaked in wool and fury, leading cavalry while carrying the future king in her belly? That's not fairy tale fluff. That's a footnote most textbooks skim past. But here, in this quiet space, we give it its weight. There's a scene I like to picture. It's winter, maybe December. Margaret is pacing the length of her war tent, boots tapping against icy mud, as a servant brings her a tray of broth and sweetmeats. She ignores it. She's writing letters, not love notes, but orders signed with a firm hand and a sharper mind. Outside, the fire crackles. Inside, she plots. And beneath her skin, a tiny heartbeat ticks toward destiny. Did it all work? Not quite. Margaret's son, Prince Edward, was eventually killed in battle. Her husband was murdered in the Tower of London, and she was captured, stripped of power, held for ransom. But before you sigh, know this: she lived. Quietly, she lived out her days in France, cared for by relatives, her body weary but her mind still razor sharp, like a sword tucked under a pillow. And through all of it, she kept her recipes: almond, milk stews, spiced pears in wine, gingered fish. One chronicler even noted she was partial to custards that smelled of orange blossom and snow. That sounds like poetry. But maybe it was just comfort. So, if tonight you treat yourself to a little bowl of something sweet, know that a queen once did the same, perhaps, staring out over snow-dusted vineyards, thinking of a son who never wore a crown. Isn't it strange how soft things survive even in the hardest places? Let's drift gently from Margaret's candlelit room now. The hearth is low, the air smells of soot and saffron, and the sky outside is turning to velvet. There's more ahead. The halls of history are long, and we've only just started walking. So take a breath, close your eyes if you wish, and let your thoughts drift to the next shadowy chamber, where yet another royal secret waits, tucked between folds of linen and legend. We'll continue, softly, from here. A stone castle rises over the windswept plains of Castile. The sky above is a soft grey, and the air carries the distant hum of clinking metal from the blacksmith's yard below. But within these cold walls, behind heavy oak doors draped in embroidered silks, there is warmth and a queen with eyes like smoke and thoughts sharper than any sword. Her name, Joanna of Castile. Now, some called her mad, others melancholic. But the truth, as it so often is, was quieter, more layered. She was passionate, loyal, wounded, and what happened to her? Well, it's a tale stitched together with roses, coffins, and candle smoke. Let me ask you something. How long would you carry a broken heart before letting it go? Joanna married Philip the Handsome, a Habsburg prince with golden curls and a smile that made half of Europe swoon. She loved him, fiercely, obsessively. Some said, too much. But who decides how much is too much when you're a queen and your world is made of duty and silk and endless waiting? Their love was volcanic, stormy, and when he died suddenly, some say poison Joanna broke, but not in the way you'd expect. No tears on the throne, no retreat to the convent. Instead, she refused to bury him. Yes, she kept his coffin with her, travelled with it, slept near it, for months, through wind and rain and quiet moonlit nights. Creepy, perhaps, but maybe. It was her only way to hold on to something that felt real in a world where everyone else wanted her silenced. They locked her away, called her Juana la Loca, Joanna the Mad. But what if she wasn't mad at all? What if she was simply grieving in a world that had no patience for female sorrow? Let's slow here. Let's pause in her chamber. Picture the velvet drapes swaying gently, perfumed with crushed rose petals. The scent of beeswax and tallow drifting from the candles lining the walls. A gentle knock at the door. A tray of bread, goat cheese, and quince jam left quietly. No one enters. She prefers it that way, and beside her, the casket sealed, draped in fine linen, guarded not out of fear, but reverence. Love, in its strangest form. Even in sorrow, Joanna left behind details worth savoring. She adored honeyed almonds, mulled wine laced with clove, and dark rye bread spread with fig paste. Food was one of the few comforts she was allowed in her long, strange captivity. And if you were to ask her, perhaps she'd say the spices reminded her of him, sharp, warm, and lingering. There's something tragically cozy in that, isn't there? Maybe tonight, if your hearts felt a little heavy, you'll understand her a bit more. The quiet ache, the rituals that keep us afloat, even if they make no sense to anyone else. Now, outside her tower, the sky shifts. The stars begin their slow dance. The guard's trade shifts, and Joanna closes her eyes, not quite asleep, but somewhere close, somewhere between memory and peace. Let's walk softly from this space, not out of fear, but respect. There are more queens ahead, and more secrets, some colder, some sweeter, but all woven with the same threads of quiet rebellion and velvet silence. We'll slip into the next chamber soon. Let your thoughts rest for a moment. The castle halls are long, but we have time. Now let's slip quietly through the darkened hallways of history, following the echo of soft slippers across chilled stone floors. ... We find ourselves in Scandinavia, now Denmark to be precise. The year is 1397. The sea wind carries the smell of salt and seaweed, and the wooden beams of the great halls groan under the weight of early winter. Here, In this cold and cunning world lives a queen unlike any we've met so far. Her name was Margaret I of Denmark, but don't let the cold air fool you. Her mind was as hot as an iron in a forge. She united 3 kingdoms under one crown: Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. The Kalmar Union, they called it. A feat few men could dream of, and even fewer women were allowed to attempt. But Margaret, she made it happen with patience and plans tucked behind polite smiles. No one saw her coming. That was her favorite trick. Picture this: a candlelit council chamber, voices murmuring in Danish and Swedish and Latin, maps spread across thick oak tables. And Margaret, dressed not in flashy jewels, but in heavy wool and cool confidence, listening more than she spoke, calculating, calm, always one step ahead. And while men argued over borders and battles, she served them warm mead spiced with cinnamon and honey, a distraction, maybe, or just a reminder that queens knew how to soften steel with sugar. Her court was famous for its quiet elegance: fir branches laid beneath rushes for a soft scent, roasted root vegetables glazed with wildflower, syrup, smoked herring stacked on rough brown bread. Not feasts of indulgence, but meals of meaning, nourishing and disciplined. Like the queen herself, there's a small moment, often forgotten, that I love. One winter, when tensions were high between the Scandinavian kings, Margaret held a private banquet. Only 7 guests, no servants, just bread, salted butter, and a single brass candlestick at the center of the table. No one spoke, no one dared, until Margaret lifted her cup and said, quietly, "When men are silent, kingdoms fall." No threats, no speeches, just a truth dropped, like a stone into still water. The next day, alliances shifted, lines were redrawn, and Margaret, she remained a shadow behind every decision till the very end. Can you feel the frost outside her hall? The hush of snow falling past the stained glass windows, the creak of old floorboards beneath fur-lined boots. It's peaceful in a strange way, like a storm just passed. Margaret never married again after her husband died, never gave away her power. She ruled as regent, then as queen in all but name. And when she died on a ship, mid-journey she left behind not just an empire, but a legacy written in strategy, not sentiment. Tonight, as your thoughts drift, think of that quiet table, that single candle, the hush that follows a woman who doesn't need to raise her voice, and think, too, of the warmth waiting just ahead, where another queen ruled, not with silence, but with spectacle. We'll wander into her world soon enough. But first, let's rest in Margaret's calm. Let the snow fall, let the maps be folded away, and let your breathing match the rhythm of a queen who never blinked first. Let's leave the cold halls of Denmark behind now, gently, as if closing a heavy door muffled by woolen drapes. ... The world changes again. South, warmer, dustier. The skies turn gold and the shadows stretch long. You're standing now beneath the tiled domes and stone arches of southern Italy. It's the 14th century. The air hums with incense and orange blossom. And in this lush, tense world of beauty and blood, another queen waits her story, fragrant, tangled, and just a little wicked. This is Joanna I of Naples, a queen born into power, draped in silks and duty before she could walk. But oh, her life. It reads like a Gothic novel, left open beside a flickering candle. Her first husband, Andrew of Hungary, didn't live long. There were whispers of foul play. More than whispers, really. His murder sent shockwaves across Europe, and Joanna stood, right in the center of it, very still, very composed. Some blamed her, some said she looked the other way. Either way, she ruled on, and not just ruled, flourished. Joanna turned Naples into a glittering jewel of the Mediterranean. Her court was one of art and poetry, where troubadours sang beside steaming dishes of spiced rabbit and almond tortes. Historians note she had a particular fondness for sweet figs soaked in rose water and soft cheese wrapped in lemon leaves. Can you smell that? Rich, creamy, citrus sharp. But don't let the feasting fool you. Beneath every velvet cushion was a knife. She married again and again, for husbands in total. Some say for love, others say for survival. Each one brought her either chaos or quiet traily both, yet she endured through rebellion, invasion, even trial. Yes, a queen on trial. Imagine that in her final years, the political tides turned. She was arrested, imprisoned in her own castle. Her enemies claimed she had too many secrets, too many sins, and not enough penance. Still, she wore her crown even, if it was only in memory. There's a moment historians rarely agree on, but I like to picture it anyway. Joanna, in a stone chamber, lit by a single stained glass window, sits beside a small table. There's a bowl of honeyed plums, a crust of bread. Her fingers rest on a letter never sent. She hums quiet, tuneless. Somewhere in the distance, gulls cry over the sea. The salt air finds its way through the cracks in the stone. She knows what's coming, but in that moment, she still feels like a queen. And isn't that the strange truth of history? That power can fade, but grace lingers like perfume on silk dots. So tonight, if your thoughts feel tangled, if your memories ache a little, let them. Even queens carried sorrow into sleep. Even queens whispered apologies into the night. Now let that image fade gently, like the last candle flickering out in a Neapolitan chapel. Another chamber lies ahead. New whispers, new warmth, and a queen whose sins were served on silver trays and gilded plates. But for now just rest. Let your thoughts roll like soft waves against distant shores. We'll meet there soon. A great feasting hall, carved from cool stone, glows beneath torchlight. The air carries the scent of roasted duck, sage, and warm apple tarts. Outside, the wind howls against stained glass windows, but in here, laughter dances between the wooden beams. And at the very center of this revelry, eyes lined with kohl, lips curved with knowing mischief, sits Isabella of France. But history didn't remember her for her charm at the dinner table. No. Isabella earned a far more chilling name, the She-Wolf of France. It sounds like something from a tavern tale, doesn't it? A wolf in royal robes. But peel back the growl and you'll find a story far more human-hungry, clever and sharpened by betrayal. She married Edward II of England. A political match, of course, France and England tying themselves together in another delicate knot of silken swords. But the marriage, well, it soured quickly. Edward preferred the company of his favourites, men like Piers Gaveston and Hugh Despenser. They whispered in his ear, guided his hand, and locked Isabella out of both his heart and his counsel. Now, what would you do, trapped in a cold castle with a king who ignored you and allies who vanished like morning mist? Isabella chose patience, then action. She bided her time, wore her silk gowns, smiled at banquets, sipped clove wine, all while quietly building alliances, gathering gold, whispering across borders, until the moment was ripe. And then she struck with the help of her lover, Roger Mortimer. she invaded England. Yes, invaded. A queen with ships and soldiers and purpose. Edward was captured, deposed, and eventually, well, some say he met a fate too gruesome to repeat aloud. Let's take a breath there, that's heavy. Come, sit with me by the hearth, for a moment. Let the crackle of wood soften the sharp edges of that tale. In her quieter years, Isabella loved dried cherries soaked in wine, sage-roasted chestnuts, and tiny sugared wafers crumbled over creamy custard. Comfort food. In a world where comfort was often rationed like gold, there's something oddly cozy about imagining her later in life, not as the fierce wolf of legend, but as a mother, perhaps a bit weary, watching rain bead down the glass of a quiet abbey window. They say she was eventually imprisoned, then later pardoned, allowed to live out her days in peace. Did she regret it? The invasions, the whispers, the crown stained with betrayal. No one knows, but I'd like to think. On cold nights, when the fire burned low, she may have traced the edges of old parchment letters with a wistful finger. Not sad, not guilty, just reflective, like you might do, lying under a heavy quilt, watching the moonlight drift across your ceiling. So, if you ever feel like your strength is silent, or your power misunderstood, remember Isabella, the wolf, the queen, the woman who waited. And as the feast hall dims and the shadows lean longer, let's rise and walk slowly toward the next flicker of candlelight, where another queen sits on the edge of scandal, not for war, but for love. And perhaps the deadliest secret of all, desire. The air feels softer now, perfumed with roses and warmed by spring sunlight filtering through linen curtains. We're stepping into a different kind of quarter place where glances carry more weight than swords, and the most dangerous battles are waged with smiles. This time, our queen is Anne Boleyn. Yes, her name likely rings a bell. Her story has been retold, revised, dramatized. But tonight, we're not here for the drama. We're here for the quiet, the overlooked, the little moments that whisper through the centuries. Anne wasn't born to be queen. She was born to be clever. Sent to the Netherlands and France as a girl, she learned languages, fashion, wit. She came back to England sharper than most men at court and twice as bold. Not traditionally beautiful, they said, but arresting. Her eyes, people always mentioned her eyes, and when King Henry VIII saw her, well, everything changed. But here's what people forget. She said no. At first, Anne refused to be just another mistress. She wanted more. And for years 7, in fact, Henry chased, pleaded, promised. Laws were rewritten. A church was split. Also, Anne could wear the crown. Now picture this. A feast in her honor. Silver goblets filled with spiced hippocras, platters of pomegranate stuffed quail, musicians playing soft lutes in the corner, while the scent of beeswax and bay leaves fills the air. Anne sits tall, in deep green velvet, a necklace with an ornate bee nestled at her collarbone. She smiles, but not broadly, just enough dot, but what the pageantry hides is the pressure. Whispers stirred even on the day of her coronation. Many nobles turned up their noses. Some muttered about witchcraft. Others claimed the sky looked wrong. And when Anne failed, for years, to give Henry a son, the mood shifted. Quickly, brutally. Here's something not often told. Anne loved to read. Latin prayers, French romances, political theory. She owned a falcon, white as milk, which she trained herself, her favorite treat. Sweetmeats laced with orange blossom water, tucked in little boxes with ribbons. There's something achingly gentle about that, isn't there? We all know how her story ends. A swift fall, arrest, accusations, most untrue, adultery, treason, her own brother. A trial filled with pre-decided fates. But even then, she held her head high. On the morning of her execution, she wore grey damask and an ermine-trimmed cloak. She tucked her hair beneath a linen coif so the blade wouldn't catch. It said, she smiled before kneeling, "Let that image linger. A woman denied peace in life, finding it, maybe." In her final breath, she left behind a daughter Elizabeth, who would become one of the most powerful monarchs in history. A quiet legacy whispered in the pages of books, in the glint of amber jewelry, in the laughter of a young girl reading by candlelight. If ever you felt like your worth was misunderstood, like your ambition made others uneasy, perhaps you've shared a moment with an across time. Let's walk gently from her world now, closing the velvet curtain behind us, because just ahead waits a queen who refused to fall, who outlived them all, and who turned sin into spectacle, one golden performance at a time. We're stepping now into the sweet-smelling chambers of extravagance. The doors open to embroidered silks, perfumes so strong they cling to the walls, and whispers that slide like satin along marble corridors. Welcome to the court of Catherine de' Medici. Ah, Catherine, a queen whose name tastes of intrigue, like candied violets dipped in clove. She wasn't supposed to rule. Born in Florence, orphaned young, married into the French crown as a political pawn. But oh, how she rewrote her fate, not with swords but with spectacle and secrets. She brought Italian flair to the French court. Lavish banquets where golden apples steamed in honey and deserts shaped like swans floated in pools of almond milk. She introduced the fork to France, believe it or not. Imagine the first awkward stabs at pheasant with polished silver. History has its clumsy moments too, but what people remember more, the rumors dot poison rings, black gowns, hidden passageways, astrology charts and court astrologers, even an apothecary named Nostradamus. Yes, that one is hard to separate truth from shadow, but Catherine didn't mind. Shadows gave her power. After her husband, Henry II, died from a jousting wound, a lance through the eye, of all things, Catherine stepped forward. Queen Mother, regent, manipulator. Her sons were kings, but she ruled through them, behind them, always just out of reach. She arranged marriages, crushed uprisings, and orchestrated ceremonies so theatrical they'd make a playwright swoon. One famous ball featured guests dressed as woodland creatures, masks and all. Another involved floating stages on a lake, dancers leaping like fish. But her reign was not without blood. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, perhaps the darkest stain, thousands of Protestants killed in one sweeping night of terror. Was Catherine behind it? Was she merely swept along by forces she couldn't stop? History can't decide. But in her tapestries, the figures always move gracefully. When they bleed, as she aged, Catherine clung to rituals. Incense burned daily. Her meals were timed to the stars. She took comfort in sugared almonds, rose marmalades, and thick, velvety soups spiced with nutmeg. She died with France still divided, still burning, yet her name remained. It always does. Picture this, Catherine, in her final days, walking slowly through a garden built for beauty and secrecy. The gravel crunches softly beneath her slippers. A dove coos from a fig tree. In her hand, a velvet pouch holding dried lavender and something heavier, something metallic. Maybe a key, maybe nothing at all. She pauses, looks back, not out of regret, but curiosity. She wonders how they'll remember her, as a mother, a monster, a mystery. And in that moment, the wind shifts. You feel it too, don't you? Let your breath slow. Let your mind rest on that garden bench beside her. No judgment, just soft twilight and the fading perfume of power. And now, as night deepens, we'll turn once more. There's one last room to explore, where queens no longer need to wear crowns to wield power. Where myths are woven into meals, and the greatest sin might simply be desire. A glowing hearth tucked inside a modest stone kitchen, far from the thrones and golden halls of royal courts. The air is thick with nutmeg, rosemary, and the sweet heat of mulled wine simmering over coals. It's a quiet place, the kind of place where secrets can exhale. And in this kitchen, stirring a copper pot with steady hands, is Marguerite of Navarre. Now, Marguerite wasn't your typical queen. She didn't command armies or execute rivals. Her battlefield was language, her sword, the written word. A sister to King Francis I of France, and a woman of fierce intellect. She walked through the same palace corridors as Catherine de Medici, but she left behind a different kind of scandal. Marguerite liked to ask dangerous questions. She wrote poems and stories, some full of gentle wisdom, others filled with teasing, provocative ideas about love, virtue, and what might lie behind a priest's robe or a nobleman's smile. Her most famous work, the Heptameron, was a collection of tales told by noble travelers stuck in a monastery, some bawdy, some soft, all layered with meaning. And one of those stories, it spoke of a noble woman who held the power to ruin men with a whisper. She never lifted a finger, just let rumor do the work. Is it fiction, or was Marguerite writing herself into legend? She championed Protestant reform, but didn't abandon Catholic tradition. She navigated faith like a narrow bridge in the rains, slippery, dangerous, but somehow still graceful. At court, she entertained philosophers, poets, and mystics. Some found her thrilling, others found her threatening. A woman who read too much, spoke too freely. That was always a risk. She loved almonds soaked in rosewater, fig tarts with a twist of black pepper, and goat cheese wrapped in herbs. Simple foods that felt like truth. And she insisted on fresh violets in her writing room, picked just after dawn, while the dew was still clinging. They say that when her brother, the king, was taken prisoner by the Holy Roman Emperor, she rode through dangerous terrain to negotiate his release herself. No crown, no army, just resolve and reputation. And somehow it worked. There's something quietly heroic about that, isn't there? She didn't need a sword. She had conviction. So let's rest here a while longer, by the fire, where ink stains fingertips and pages flutter like wings. Let the questions settle like dust in the air. Can a queen be powerful through softness? Can sin be found in honesty rather than deceit? Can a woman who writes of lust and longing still be a saint in someone's eyes? Marguerite didn't answer those questions. She just let them linger, and now, as the fire dims and the pages close, let's follow the scent of sandalwood and scrolls. There's another queen waiting, one whose sins weren't hidden at all. In fact, she wore them like jewels. Now the candles flicker against carved wood panels, and laughter echoes faintly from some long-forgotten feast. The smell of crushed berries and beeswax mingles in the still air. We're entering a more daring room now, where restraint was the exception, not the rule. Meet Queen Christina of Sweden, born in 1626. Christina arrived with frost on her breath and rebellion in her blood. Her father, King Gustavus Adolphus, died in battle when she was just 6. They declared her the heir and the kingdom, watched as she grew not into a typical Swedish princess, but into something stranger, bolder. She preferred swords to sewing, books to banquets. She studied Latin, philosophy, astronomy, anything that promised understanding. When foreign ambassadors visited her, they were often left blinking, unsure how to address her. Queen, scholar, trickster. Even her voice confused people, low and steady, like a stream running beneath thick ice. She famously refused to marry. "I have no intention," she said once, "to be a slave to a man." Scandalous words for her time. The court gasped. The poets whispered. Instead, she surrounded herself with artists, scientists, and mystics. Her favorite companion, a woman named Ebba Spar, whom Christina affectionately called Belle. She wrote love letters to her, gave her gifts wrapped in silk, and once referred to her as my bedfellow of many winters. Sinful, maybe, sweet, certainly, but her greatest act of rebellion came when she shocked the world and abdicated her throne voluntarily, just handed it over, packed up her books and jewels, and rode off. Why? To convert to Catholicism, a Protestant queen, leaving her icy kingdom to embrace Rome. She disguised herself in men's clothing, traveled incognito across Europe, and stunned the papal court with her arrival. Her entrance to Rome was theatrical. Opera singers, golden chariots, fireworks above the Tiber. Picture this: Christina, in a velvet doublet, sitting in a candlelit salon beside a marble bust of Socrates, eating candied fennel and sipping saffron-infused wine. Her hair cropped short, her gaze sharp. She's no longer queen by title, but more commanding than ever. In Rome, she hosted salons, wrote essays, collected art, and continued to defy every rule of her upbringing. Some adored her, some feared her, others couldn't look away, and, when she died, she became one of the few women ever buried in St. Peter's Basilica. Not as a queen, not as a saint, but as a legend. Some say Christina was selfish. Others say she was brave, but no one says she was ordinary. Let's slip out now quietly past her gilded mirror, past the velvet curtains, into a quieter corridor, one lined with oil paintings of queens who smiled too much, bowed too deeply, and, just ahead, one last flicker of sin and silk awaits. A woman so infamous, she's still blamed for a war, DI pastries and towering hairpieces that turned her into living architecture. Once, she wore a ship atop her powdered curls to honor a naval victory. Her critics called her Madame Deficit. They accused her of bankrupting France with her whims, of seducing courtiers, of dressing like a milkmaid while peasants starved. The infamous line, "Let them eat cake," was never actually hers, but it clung to her like static. She had a hidden garden at the Petit Trianon, where she escaped the weight of the crown. There, she wore muslin dresses and tended to lambs like a rural duchess from a fairy tale. She drank cold rose water and nibbled on almond tarts filled with jam. Was it foolish? Probably. But also, was it a woman craving air in a palace full of smoke? Picture this: Marie at dusk, seated in a white gazebo, the last light of day glowing on the fountain beside her. Musicians strum quietly in the distance, and she presses a sugared violet to her lips. A letter rests open in her lap, soft ink, shaky words. It's from her mother, Empress Maria Theresa, chastising her again. Marie sighs, and the sigh is not of guilt, but of exhaustion. History remembers her as frivolous. but she was also a girl caught in the gears of a machine that had no brakes. When revolution came, it was thunderous. She was stripped again, this time not of gowns, but of dignity. Her husband, Louis XVI, executed, her children taken, her hair cut short. The crowds jeered as she was carted to the guillotine in 1793. She was 30-7. Yet in those final moments, witnesses say she walked with composure, apologized to her executioner when she stepped on his foot. A queen to the end. In silence, if not in silk. Now, let her rest. The world misread her, perhaps still does. But as we leave the perfumed gardens and echoing halls, there's a lesson beneath the frosting. Even the most glittering queens bled. Let's carry that truth gently with us now, like lace folded into a drawer. Ahead, there's a quieter space, where crowns are replaced by comfort, and stories begin to soften, ready for dreams. The fire has burned low now, just embers glowing beneath a veil of soft ash. The echoes of silk gowns, whispered secrets, and midnight rebellions have faded into the hush of this moment. We've wandered through chambers once filled with perfume and politics, laughter and longing, sin and sacrifice. And perhaps you noticed, each queen wore her crown a little differently. Some balanced it with pride, some with pain. Some bent the rules until they snapped quietly in the dark. Others danced right over them, barefooted and smiling. But all of them, every Marguerite, Christina, Eleanor, or Marie, held power in more than just titles. They shaped history in ways that ink could barely capture, not just through wars or laws or arranged marriages, but in the stolen glances, the forbidden letters, the way they stirred honey into tea while quietly plotting revolutions of their own. And maybe that's what lingers now, as you lie back and let sleep find you. Not the sins, not the scandals, but the quiet insistence of each woman's voice in a world that preferred them silent. Do you feel it? That gentle thread of defiance running through the centuries, hidden in the folds of velvet robes and tucked behind jeweled smiles. A thread that says, I was here, I lived, I loved wrongly, I longed loudly, I mattered. Even now, centuries later, their stories ripple softly beneath the surface, like candlelight on stone, like lace brushing over old skin, like footsteps in a corridor where no one's walked in years. So as your thoughts drift like leaves on a stream, let this be your closing lullaby. A queen once danced in moonlight to forget a war. Another wrote poems when she was told not to read. One kissed a woman's hand and called it friendship. And one lost her head but never her poise. They were complicated, flawed, radiant, much like the rest of us. If this quiet journey helped your mind unwind even, just a little, feel free to leave a gentle comment below. Let me know which queen stayed with you, or simply whisper goodnight if words feel too heavy. And if you haven't already, you're welcome to subscribe for more soft wanderings through dusty history. Only if it feels right, of course. Now, close your eyes, friend. Let the palace halls fade, the velvet curtains fall, and the crowns rest upon forgotten shelves. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. Sleep well, sleep deeply, sleep kindly. Until next time, soft whisper from the candlelit corridors of the past. Good night.